might look like.
And Danielle, I believe you hold a PhD. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I do. I hold a master's and a PhD. Alas, neither of them are from UBC. I came to UBC as a staff member, but I have not yet done a degree there. I suppose there's still time. But yes, I can, if it's helpful, speak a little bit about my decision to go to graduate school and my experience in two research based programs. They were both in Canada. I completed my master's at the University of Toronto and my PhD at McGill University.
Great. Well, thanks for being here, Danielle. Thanks for helping us. And the main purpose really today is to guide you through the grad school application process, but also to answer your questions. So if you do have any questions, please post them in the Q&A. So I'm going to turn the chat off for the moment, but please post any questions that you have in the Q&A. You can also upvote questions. So if you see a question that somebody else has posted, and you want to hear the answer to that one, just make sure that you upvote it. And we're going to do our best to answer as many questions as we can today. You can see the agenda on the screen at the moment. We're going to talk a little bit at the beginning just about the differences between undergrad and graduate, different types of graduate program that you can study on, as well as some of the professional development opportunities at UBC. And then we will dive into the application, talk about the overall process, but also focus in on the statement of interest, on how to reach out to a supervisor if you need to do that, as well as references. So we'll cover all of that today, and we'll do questions at the end, as well as during the session as well. So do post those into the Q&A. The first thing to begin with really is thinking about your reasons, thinking about your why about grad school, and there's lots of great reasons to go to grad school, and you can see some of them listed here. But it's really important to know what your why is, and what's going to motivate you, because grad school is difficult. Sometimes it's pretty hard work, so you need to really know that motivation and know why you're taking on the graduate program. Danielle, maybe I can bring you back in again. What are some of the things that one would should be considering if they're thinking about grad school? What are some of the benefits? And you've been through this process. Like, what are some of the things that motivated you to go to grad school?
Yeah, for me, it was a combination, I think, of 2 points you've already spoken about, a passion and enthusiasm for the subject. I think that many people find that they take courses at the undergraduate level and it's enough to get them interested, but it doesn't always give us the ability to hone in on a more niche area, to do original research in an area, or to spend a more extended time on that topic. So for me, my background was in English literature. I had taken lots of English literature courses, but I wanted to continue to do that and focus a bit more. The other, of course, huge piece of graduate school is thinking about career paths and career progression. And I would really, really encourage folks to be reflecting on that. A reality is that a graduate program may open additional doors in your career or make different parts of career paths possible. And I think we'll talk more about this later, or happy to take more questions. I really urge people to talk to people working in the fields they want to go into to get some relevant and kind of up-to-date information on that. It can definitely be tempting to think, of course, having a master's or a PhD is inherently going to give me access to more jobs, and maybe, but I think it's really worthwhile, particularly if career progression or career advancement is a key goal for you. Talk to the people who have the jobs that you want. Do they have graduate degrees? Are they hiring people with graduate degrees? Is that something they recommend that you do? And that might give you a lot more clarity of information about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of great advice there. And I think once you sort of know your key reasons for going to grad school, that's going to really help you through the application process, because you'll often be referring to that, whether it be in your statement of interest or if you interview for grad school. So having that at the beginning is really important. Grad school is different from undergrad. Here's some characteristics, like some differences. Key thing about grad school really is that you're really going into depth. So at undergrad, you cover a wide range of different areas, But at the grad school level, you're really stepping into the field and focusing much more deeply into a particular area. As it says at the bottom there, you'll be inside of the field looking out, as opposed to from outside of the field looking in. You'll be much more self-directed in your study compared with undergrad. So it is a step up. It is a change of pace for sure. Daniel, thinking back to when you made that transition, what was the big change for you, and would you have any advice for people stepping up to grad school?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing that comes up in a lot of different programs is greater autonomy over learning. And I mean, and I think we see that transition certainly in undergrad as well. But I think the expectation to often be quite self directed, particularly if you are going into a research focused program, you may be largely expected to be figuring out what upcoming milestones are, checking out the requirements of your program. Of course, your supervisor and your department coordinator can support you with that, but they may or may not be emailing you to say, this form needs to be submitted on such and such a date. So I think that there's often really an expectation of a greater level of autonomy. The other thing I like to highlight, and I think this is both an opportunity and sometimes a bit challenging, is moving from a consumer to a producer of knowledge in your field. I heard someone once describe it really well as you go from, for example, studying sociology as an undergrad to being a sociologist or historian or biologist or physicist. Particularly if you are looking at those research-based programs, what you are doing is developing the skills and the ability to make an original contribution to knowledge in that field. And I think that's quite a different mindset than maybe as an undergrad where you're building your baseline of competency and knowledge.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, I really like that description of becoming a producer of knowledge. It's pretty exciting when you think about it. You become a producer, a creator of new knowledge. And another thing that you really need to think about as well is the type of program that you're going into. So, broadly speaking, at UBC, there's two types of graduate program. You have research-based graduate programs as well as course-based or professional grad programs. And you can see here some of the differences between the types of program. Course-based programs more comparable in some ways to undergraduate study. There'll be a set program length, set curriculum. You'll move through the program and then you complete it with a final project or graduating paper. In a course-based or professional program, you will do some research. So there will be aspects or research involved, but you would not do the same amount of research as you would do in a research-based graduate degree, whether that be a master's or a PhD. So research-based is exactly that. You do some coursework at the beginning of the program, but essentially a majority of the program is doing the research, is defining a project, is conducting research, analysing it, and delivering a thesis, either at the master's level or the PhD level. So there's lots of different types of program. Understand, there's only a couple of different types of program, but there's lots of programs at UBC. So find, the program that's going to work for you and understand, the type of program that it is, because that will change how you approach the application and change aspects of the application. Daniel, would you have any tips on sort of deciding what type of graduate program might be best for somebody?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that will come back to your goals. What do you want from this experience? If you are looking to do an in-depth research project or write a thesis, that is likely going to be a research-based program. Course-based or professional programs may be faster, so just something to think about. And course-based or professional may also sometimes be a bit more tied to industry or applied work outcomes. It's not uncommon for some, although not all, course-based or professional to have a practicum or a co-op or an internship opportunity. So if getting some form of applied work experience during your grad studies is important to you, that may be something to think about. Generally course-based or professional are going to be also a little more linked, I would say, to equipping you with skills. Now, of course,
Mm-hmm.
research-based, you will learn the skills in order to do the project, but I think it's a slightly different connection between you're learning the skills to create the knowledge versus they are teaching you the skills as the core focus of the program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That the idea of clear goals is coming up. So make sure whatever program you're applying to, that you understand what you're in it for and what those goals are. Just before we dive into the application, I did just want to talk a little bit about your professional development at UBC, and there's a lot of things that happen around your graduate program, and that's pretty important. Danielle, I know this is an area that you're really involved in. Could you tell us a bit more about the importance of that development and some of the highlights, some of the things that are happening at UBC?
For sure. And just before I do, one more thought on the professional versus research based.
Mm-hmm.
I would say pretty much all PhD programs are going to be research programs by definition, so that the split is more so at the master's. If you do hope to do a PhD, it is typically going to sometimes make more sense to do a research based master's. Not to say that it's impossible, but something to keep in mind. If you are planning to move to a PhD or complete a PhD, the research based master's is the more common route to that. The course based or the professional is more likely to be considered a terminal degree. And also, I will say it is not inherently better to do the PhD, right? If it works for your goals, I think that comes back to knowing your goals, talking to people in your field. If the master's meets your needs, that of course is a wonderful decision, but just something to keep in mind there.
Yeah, great point. I'm glad you made that point. And I just wanted to come back just to a question we had from Parth, who asked, is there a direct entry option from bachelor's to PhD? I know typically in Canada one would do a master's degree first and then move into a PhD, but I think there are some programs where you could go straight in, but from my knowledge, it seems like most of the time you do a master's first and then do a PhD. But what do you think, Danielle? Are there direct entry options?
Yeah, there usually are direct entry. It may be a little bit less typical, so you'd probably want to talk with the department, talk with a potential supervisor, also just get clear on why that choice makes sense for you. It might be possible in some programs, but yes, I would say it is more typical that someone is coming in as a master's student. I will just also say, and not to make this more confusing, but the relationship between the master's and the PhD program can be different in different academic disciplines. In some fields, there's quite a clear progression and even expectation that someone coming in as a master's is going to continue on. In other fields, it's quite separate. You complete your master's, you can apply to a PhD, you don't have to. Those are kind of treated as, in my case, I went to an entirely different institution. It was a whole other degree and a whole other experience.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. That's great. Sorry for taking us a little bit off track there, Danielle, but do you want to loop back and talk about the professional development opportunity?
Yeah, and I think it's just important to say, well, your academic experience at UBC, the courses you take, the research project, if you choose to do one, that of course is really central to the graduate experience, but there is so much else going on. And I think depending on the duration of your graduate studies and what's important to you, it's just really important to know that you have lots of support and lots of opportunities to develop additional skills. Research is a skill. There are all sorts of things associated with it, and there's a number of different offices and trainings that might range from teaching you how to use different statistical software or how to conduct research ethically, right? Which in some disciplines is quite important. There's also lots of resources and information about how to share and disseminate your research. There's workshops and learning about how to get grants so that you can have funding for your research. Teaching is quite important to many graduate students. We have an incredible Center for Teaching and Learning that provides lots of support with helping individuals who may be active as teaching assistants or instructors develop their teaching skills. Also, if you run into challenges along the way, there are a variety of health and wellness services. There's a wonderful graduate student society that's very active and provides a lot of advocacy and support for graduate students. So I think it's fair to say your academic program and your home department will be a big part of your experience, but they don't have to be the entirety of your experience. And again, I would think about, what was important to you perhaps in your undergraduate or previous programs? What did you find you need or benefited from? Almost certainly something similar would be available to you during your time at UBC.
Great. Yeah, no, that's excellent. Like it's so exciting. There's so much support, and I think as well during your graduate study years, you are gonna grow a lot in terms of your professional development. These are some really important stages in your career development. So there's a lot happening at UBC, some of which Danielle outlined, and there's loads more information on our website as well that you should check out. But let's talk now about the application, and what you should be doing or what you can be doing to make your application as strong as possible. Um, this is our sort of general process that we encourage you to follow, and you don't have to, but what we really encourage you to do is go through these stages. Often people they go straight to the application, but we'd really encourage you first of all to sort of explore all of the different options that are open to you at UBC and also at other universities as well. There's so many graduate degree program options out there, so find the right one for you, and then give yourself time to review the admissions requirements, to prepare documentation. You might need to reach out to a supervisor. These are things that you need to give yourself a little bit of time to do, and before you get to the application stage. But the key thing I'd really say is that at the graduate level, the application process and even the application requirements are different for each graduate program. So at UBC, we have well over 100 programs, and each one of them will have slightly different processes or maybe a different application criteria. So you need to familiarize yourself clearly with the program or programs that you're applying to and really understand what those requirements are. And understanding that at the beginning is super important. You don't want to be halfway through an application or be approaching it and you realize you need to do something that you haven't done. So really, take your time and plan out what you need to do for the program that you're applying to. Danielle, have you got any other general tips on, approaching the grad school application?
Yeah, just to echo what you said, give yourself as much time as you can. Also, this probably goes without saying, but the deadlines are typically quite strict, so you do want to be aware of those. Also, take a look at a range of different programs. There's some that I think are quite well known, and there are some that I think are people may be less familiar with. But depending on what your interests and your goals are, you may find that some of those newer or smaller programs are actually a really good fit for what you're hoping to do.
Yeah, excellent advice. Yeah, totally agree with that. And you can see there on the right hand side the application fee. So it's $110 for domestic students and $168.25 for international students. So you need to pay for each program that you apply to. So if you decide to apply to two programs, you will need to pay the application fee twice. So again, be really careful and really think about which program you want to apply to. And we did have a question as well that I want to answer now, from Prakar, just asking about application fee waivers, like if it's a possibility to get a fee waiver. So generally, we don't offer application fee waivers. Sometimes programs can offer them, so you could contact the program that you're applying to and ask them if they offer a fee waiver. But the only general fee waiver that we provide is if you live in one of the 50 least developed countries in the world, as identified by the United Nations, then you would receive a fee waiver. So if you live in one of those 50 least developed countries, you would get a fee waiver for the application. So you can see the list of those countries and more details on our website if you look up the application fee waiver on our grad.ubc page. And I'll try and post a link to that later as well. But that's the only kind of big fee waiver that we do. And very occasionally, it's not common, but occasionally programs might be able to offer you a fee waiver, but it needs to be quite an exceptional circumstance normally. So let's talk about the online application. just in terms of what to expect, these are things that you would fill out in the form. So you would create a login, and then you provide us with those contact details, personal details, your academic history, as well as sort of any other aspects of the application that they ask for. So the program will set those fields and ask you for certain information, such as they might ask you for funding information or publications and things like that. So that's those are the things that you would need to fill out in a form. The campus-wide login, which is the thing at the top there, that stays with you. So once you've created a campus-wide login, that gives you access to UBC systems, and you would keep that same login if you become a student, and you would also keep the same login if you were unsuccessful and reapplied again. So it will remember your details. So make sure that you keep those login details. And then these are some of the documents that you'll need to provide in the grad school application. So we will need to see your official transcripts, test scores if you studied in a language other than English, such as the English proficiency, like the IELTS or TOEFL tests. Other test scores that you may be asked for are GRE or GMAT tests. They are standardized tests that some graduate programs require. Most programs don't require them at UBC, but sometimes they do. You'll need to write a statement of interest or a written answer to a series of questions. You'll need to provide us with 3 references, and often you'll need to provide us with a CV or a resume. So these are some of the things that you should expect to put together as part of your application. Really important that you review the program's requirements. As I mentioned earlier, it's different for each program, so just be really clear on what you need to put together for your program's application. And I know we've had a question here, just to dive back into the Q&A. I know we've had a question here from James about what opportunities there are for funding for a master's, which is a really great question. And you can actually find that information on the program page. So it's the same page, the graduate degree programs page. And I can try and show you this actually. Let me just try and show this to you. Hopefully you can see my screen. So you'll go into the prospective students section, the graduate degree programs page, and then you can search through all of our programs, and you can search by keywords. So I'm going to search for pharmaceutical sciences, and then I'm going to go into this master's program. And the reason why I'm choosing this one is because they do offer funding for the master's students. And if I go down into the tuition and financial support section, I'll see details here of what the funding would look like per year for that program. Now, you will receive funding or some form of funding for most research-based programs, but typically you will not receive the same amounts of funding or receive funding for course-based or professional programs. Sometimes you may be able to get a scholarship, but funding is directed towards research-based programs. So that's something that you need to understand and build into your financial planning alongside your application. But you can find this information on our website. It's all on the website, so you can see examples of the tuition costs, of the financial support, of the funding that may be available for the program that you're interested in. So make sure that you take a look at our website. Another thing that we have on the website, which I'd encourage you to use, is a cost of living calculator, and it allows you to put together a pretty basic budget, but it can get you started in terms of what the program is going to cost for you. And I've just posted a link to the cost of living calculator in the chat. So let's jump back to the application itself. You'll be looking at the program page to understand the application requirements, and part of that will be the minimum academic requirements. So all graduate programs at UBC have the same minimum academic requirements, but some programs will have additional requirements as well. So for the minimum requirements here, it's based on the country where you finished, where you completed your degree. So if you completed your degree in Canada or the US, you can see the minimum requirements at the bottom of the screen, which is a 4-year bachelor's degree B plus average in your third and fourth year courses, and at least 12 credits of those third and fourth year courses must be in the A range, so A minus to A plus. If you studied in a different country, you can find out the minimum requirements for your country on our website. I've put some pretty high level basic requirements here for these countries, just to give you an example and show you that it is different by country. It's not based on citizenship, it's based on the country that you completed your degree in. And you need to understand what the minimum requirements are for the country where you completed your degree in. And I'll post a link to that in a moment for the minimum academic requirements. So make sure that you do this research and really understand if you meet the requirements or not. If you do meet the requirements, then that's great. You want to be moving forward with the application. If you're not sure, if it's maybe on the borderline, if you're not quite sure if you meet the requirements or not, my advice would be to reach out to the program that you're interested in and ask them directly if they think you should apply or not. I'd always encourage people, if they think they meet the requirements, or if they're on the border, to put together an application and apply. But please be sure to check what those requirements are. Many of you will be working towards your degree. You may not have finished yet, but that's okay. We can assess your application based on the grades that you have so far. But you need to be on track to meeting those requirements if you're applying to UBC. Okay, so I hope that helped on the minimum requirements. Make sure that you check out more information on our website. But let's talk more now about the statement of interest, which is a really important part of the application. It's sometimes called a statement of intent or a statement of purpose, and you can be asked for different things at this stage of the application. So normally you're asked to write a statement of interest, which is typically like a 500-word statement, maybe longer than that, maybe shorter, depending on the program. Just outlining your academic and or your professional goals and how these align with the graduate program that you are applying to. So the statement of interest is important because we can see your grades really easily. So we can see your GPA, we can see that you meet the minimum requirements, we can see that you're smart. Like, that's great. But what the statement of interest gives us is it gives us insight into who you are. It's a chance for us to hear directly from you about why you want to go to grad school and about what you hope to achieve during your time at UBC. These are some things that you would write about or do in your statement of interest. So if you're applying to a research-based program, you'd identify potential research areas and questions that you'd like to ask. If you're applying to a course-based or professional program, you will focus on your professional goals and what you want to achieve after the program, as well as what you want to achieve during the program. But certainly you will tell us that story of who you are and what you hope to achieve at grad school. Talking about your knowledge of the field, of trends and developments, of methodologies, particularly for a research-based program, is a good thing that you could do. But the key thing is you need to write with clarity, avoid spelling mistakes, and really be specific. So it's good to not write lots and waffle on. Be succinct, be direct, and really use every word and every sentence, showing your motivation and what you hope to achieve at grad school. Danielle, would you have any tips on approaching the statement of interest? What advice would you have maybe for people to help them sort of reflect on their skills and experience and things that they could include in the statement?
Yeah, I know it can feel daunting, so give yourself some time to work on it. I think essentially in your statement, you're trying to answer the question, why would I succeed in this graduate program? So providing evidence of similar contexts or similar situations in which you have been successful or which would prepare you to be successful in graduate school. Why do you want to do this program? Shane mentioned earlier, grad school can get tough. So I think something people are looking for in these statements is someone whose motivation is sincere and strong enough that they will be able to kind of make it through and ultimately complete that program, and that you have a realistic understanding of what this program is, what it's preparing you to do, and that what you want from it aligns with what the program is going to give you. So I think that point about professional goals, I think that you want those pieces to be aligned. Just as far as like the functionalities of it, it can be daunting to have that blank screen in front of you. What I've suggested to some folks, try recording yourself if you find that easier. Perhaps try to answer some of those questions. If the personal statement may actually give you prompts or questions they want you to respond to, answer those questions out loud, record it, transcribe it. You will need to, work on the draft and refine it a bit, but that might give you a really good baseline because when I work with students who are working on their applications, often if I say to them, Shane, tell me why you want to apply to this master's, people can speak it out loud, no problem. So you might find that really helpful for many reasons. Sometimes the putting it in writing can feel tricky, but that might give you a baseline to start with.
I love that idea. That's a great idea. I like the idea of talking about it and recording yourself. That's really interesting. We've had a great question in here from Usama, who asks, how personal should the personal statement be? Are you looking to know the person or to know the student? What do you think of that, Danielle? Do you want to take a shot at that question?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. I mean, some of it I think is up to you. You have a lot of agency over your statement, and I think it's a question of what you want to disclose. And some people may have more they want to share or feel more comfortable sharing different things. I think if there are things about you as an individual or your identity or experiences that inform why you want to work in a certain field or why you want to do a certain research project, it is absolutely worth sharing those. If you are a member of a certain community and you are going to do research that impacts that community, that probably tells whoever's reading the statement something about why, again, this is motivational to you. If you've overcome particular obstacles and those obstacles, again, have shaped how you're going to show up in that program or speak to your ability to succeed in that program, that can also be worth mentioning. But I don't think there's any specific formula. I think it's really up to you what you want the admissions committee to know when they're reviewing the statement. And I would go back to these questions. What will help them to see why I can succeed in the program, why I'm motivated to be part of it, and also what I'm going to offer to that program.
Yeah, I really like those three areas. That's great. And yeah, I've heard it described as well in terms of like how you can format your statement is to talk about like past, present, and future. You're going to focus much more on sort of the present, but certainly we want to understand, what's brought you to this point of wanting to study at grad school, and why have you formed these ideas? What's brought you to this point? What do you hope to achieve during grad school, and then what do you hope to do afterwards as well? So yeah, I think in terms of knowing the person or the student, I would think of them as the same person, or the same thing. So I think you need to sort of intertwine those two as much as possible. Yeah, and I think we do want to understand who you are. So yeah, I would intertwine the person and the student in your statement. And you can see some other top tips here that we've got. I really like Danielle's tip of talking out loud before you write. When you do get your draft down, make sure that you write several iterations, get feedback from other people. You're not going to write your statement of interest in an afternoon. It's really important that you write several iterations, get lots of feedback, and make it better each time. Ultimately, you're trying to tell your story. So getting that statement as strong as possible is really, really important. Okay, great. So let's move on now and talk about reaching out to potential supervisors. We've had lots of questions about this, and we're going to answer them now. So let's just talk about a couple of things. First of all, this is a really important step, but I must emphasize that you do not need to do this for many programs. So you need to check to see if this is a requirement for your program. So remember the graduate degree programs page that I showed you earlier. I'll post the link again just so you have it. But you need to look into the admissions requirements for the program that you're interested in, and see what they want you to do. If they ask you to reach out to a supervisor, then you need to do that. You need to work through this step. Sometimes they will not ask you. They'll instead ask you to list out some of the people within the department that you'd like to work with, or maybe they will be able to assign a supervisor to you once you start graduate school. So it depends on the program that you're applying to. And of course, for course-based and professional programs, you do not need a supervisor, so you don't need to do this step. But if you do need to do this step, we're going to tell you how to do it now. The first thing to do is to do your prep work. So if you need to find a supervisor, you need to find a faculty member at UBC who's willing to work with you and supervise your research. So you need to familiarize yourself with programs, read relevant papers that faculty members may have written. If you can, talk to current graduate students at UBC, if you can connect with them. If you are applying to grad school at the same university that you're currently studying, you could take classes with prospective supervisors, volunteer in their lab or a similar lab. You want to try and network and connect and find a supervisor. And you can do that through our website, through our research supervisors page. So this is a place where you can search through faculty members at UBC and see if they are taking on students or not. So this is the research supervisors page. You can search by keyword, and then it will give you a list of faculty members in this area who you could potentially reach out to. And you can filter this list down by those who are recruiting at different levels. You can filter it down by faculty, by department. And this is a great way to find faculty members and begin your research. But if you click into these pages, you'll see more information about the faculty members, about their research interests, the programs that they are part of. Sometimes you'll find videos if the faculty member adds them, and you'll also see if they're recruiting students at the moment. So you can find out if they are looking to recruit students, and if they are, then you could reach out to them. But it's really important before you do so that you do your research. If you're reaching out to faculty members without having done the research first, then it may be a little bit of a waste of time. But Danielle, were you required to find a faculty member, a supervisor, before you applied to grad school? Would you have any advice on the process here?
Yeah. So my own experience, no, I was in a discipline where you showed up, you started the program, and you chose your supervisor later on. For the folks who do need to identify a supervisor at the time of application, and I know this came up in a bunch of the questions, and I think, Shane, you've touched on it in this slide. If you are not hearing back from potential supervisors, it may be worthwhile to consider other supervisors. I would also think about, is there anyone in your network, right? If you're applying to a research-based program in a discipline, most likely you have previous academic experience in that discipline. This will be trickier if you're from outside of Canada, but most academic disciplines are actually fairly small communities. Is there anyone who taught you at the undergraduate level or you've met at a conference who might know someone at UBC? Could they actually introduce you? You may be much more likely to hear back from that professor if someone connects you or acts as a go-between. Otherwise, I think that clarity, specificity, being clear about why you want to work with that professor, what you're bringing to the table, and what you know about their research. But I think I would just echo this point that sometimes the best known names are best known because they're most established, and those may be the folks who have the least capacity to take on new graduate students. Mm-hmm. So of course you do want to be thinking about supervisors whose research interests align with your own. But I think it may be the case that you want to give yourself some flexibility, be strategic in your outreach, and if there is anyone who you think might know that person as a collaborator or a fellow scholar, would they be willing to facilitate that introduction?
Yeah, that's a great tip. And actually, I was speaking to a grad student today who is from Argentina, and they had never heard of UBC. Like they had never heard of UBC at all, but their professor had, and the professor knew someone at UBC, and then they referred the student to them, and that's how they ended up at UBC. So I really appreciate that advice. I really agree with that advice that Danielle's given. That think about your current network, like which professors that you know that might be able to help connect you with others, and do use the website to find people. I want to answer the first question that's in the Q&A, like the most upvoted one. And this person's saying that they've been trying to reach out to supervisor. They haven't got that response, and they understand that they are recruiting students, but they haven't heard back. This is a common issue. It's important to understand that supervisors get several quick inquiries each day. They might get 3, 4, or 5 emails per day at this time of year. So they don't have time to respond to everybody. And what I would suggest is, as Danielle mentioned as well, like it's okay to follow up. So you could reply all to your original email and follow up with the supervisor. But if it's not working out, if you're not hearing back, it's probably just the supervisor politely saying no. And it's time that you considered other people and moved on to different options at UBC or even at different universities. So, this is a difficult process sometimes, and you're unlikely to find a supervisor on the first, reach out. But I would say develop a list, at UBC and at other institutions, and gradually reach out to people. Reach out to the program as well. Ask them if they can connect you with faculty members. But yeah, it's and one more thing as well. If you're trying to reach out to faculty members and you're not getting a response, and if no one's responding to you, you need to take some time out and probably reflect on what's happening here. Like, is your email strong enough? Have you done the research? Is your research idea good enough? What's happening? If you're not getting a response, you need to take some time out, reflect on that, think about what you could change, rather than continuing to do something that isn't working. So that's another tip that I would give you as well. Daniel, I'm just going to have a look, see if there's any other questions here. But if you've got any other thoughts on this part of the process, jump in. Is there anything else you can think of?
Yeah, no, and just to go back to your point, Shane, not all graduate programs require you to have a supervisor, so it's possible that none of this will be part of your process, or there are definitely some disciplines where that happens later on. And that might sound like identifying in your statement of intent, I would be maybe interested in working with so and so. It's useful to be able to name a few names of people who you think could be potential supervisors, but that might be a much more informal process. And in that case, you're not kind of looking for that confirmation in the way you would if you need to have a supervisor's support when you apply.
Yeah, great advice. And yeah, and I know it's a challenging step in the grad school application process, but a lot of students can do this. They connect in with faculty members. They find a good fit, and they join UBC. So do persevere, but obviously make sure that you do that research before you do any reach out. I just wondered then if you could just speak a little bit about the importance of that relationship with the supervisor. The importance of not just finding a supervisor, but finding the right person, because it's a pretty important part of grad school, that sort of relationship that you have with your supervisor.
Yeah, and it's interesting. With the conversation has been sort of about how do I find someone who will take me on, but I think part of it is also how do you find someone that you want to work with. To go back to that idea of if you do already know some research in your discipline, did they have a sense of what it's like to work with this person? Have they heard positive things from graduate students who have studied with them? It is quite likely that, if that initial outreach is successful, one thing a professor may say is, let's get on a Zoom call, let's have an initial meeting to talk about. It's often like not quite as formal as like an interview per se, but it's trying to figure out exactly that. Are we going to work well together. And I think it's useful for you to reflect on your working style, what you want from the graduate school experience, whether you get the sense that you're going to work well with this person. You may not be able to do this before the initial application, but particularly before you accept an offer. And I know there was at least one or two questions about this in the Q&A. See if you can talk to current graduate students in that program, or potentially current graduate students working with that supervisor. They may be very open to telling you about their experiences. Most of the time, I would just go through that program. If, say, the professor runs a lab, often they will list kind of people or students working with them. So you should be able to see either through the program or a specific website who their current students are. Email or reach out to them. Yeah, really worthwhile, I think, to talk about people who have been or are being supervised by that faculty member about what their experiences are like.
Yeah, great tips. And actually, Giovanna asked, "How can we find current students to talk to?" And I think what you outlined there was really good. You can often find current grad students within a lab webpage or within the program's webpage. And actually, often programs will connect you with current students if you ask them. So you could ask the program that you've applied to or you're planning to apply to, and they can often connect you with students, with current grad students. Who can correspond by email potentially. Okay, just one more question on this, and we'll move on from Usama. Can you reach out to multiple potential supervisors, and should you disclose it if you are? Do you want to start on that one, Daniel? Oh, are you there?
Sorry, for a second, my unmute didn't want to work for me. Yeah, because I wasn't in a discipline where I went that route. I mean, I would defer to saying if you know any current graduate students, and now those don't have to be UBC students, right? If you're at whatever university and there's master's or PhD students there, they've likely gone through a similar process. I mean, I think the reality is you may have to reach out to multiple supervisors because, as Shane was indicating, and if you're applying certainly to multiple schools, at the same time, to that point about it being a small community, people do quite likely talk. So I think I would want to be strategic and transparent. Talk to current grad students in your discipline about what their approach was. If you have current mentors in your current program, ask them kind of how they feel about it and what their take is. In general, I think as long as you're being open and transparent with people, you're probably okay. But I think it is about balancing, the reality that people may well be communicating with each other if they're in the same field.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And I would say just it's okay to reach out to multiple supervisors, but the key thing is to make sure that you send a unique email to each one. So where we would have red flags, or where the problem would be, is if you're sending the same email to 3 professors in the same department. So you need to avoid doing that. So, but if there's 3 professors in the same department and you'd like to work with any of them, that's okay to reach out to each of them individually, but just make sure that it's an individual reach out and it's a unique reach out to each one. And for sure, you can say, I've also emailed Professor Smith or Professor, Barclay, whatever. You can do that. So it is okay, but just make sure that the reach out is unique each time. Okay, so let's just spend a couple of minutes on the letters of reference, and then we can answer more questions. So letters of reference, 3 are required for all grad programs at UBC. They're a really important part of the process. Sometimes people ask, are they important? Do we read them? And the answer to both of those questions is yes, because they provide us with a glimpse of who you are. From someone who knows you. So it's really important that you get 3 people who are willing to write you strong references. We talk a lot about academic versus professional references, and you can see the definitions of academic and professional references on the screen. If you're applying to a research-based program, they're going to really want to see academic references. They want to hear about you in an academic environment. But if you've been away from academia for several years, it's more acceptable to submit a professional reference. And sometimes programs will ask for at least one professional reference. They might say, we'd like to see 2 academic references and 1 professional reference, or 1 academic reference and 2 professional references. It depends on the program that you're applying to. So again, just make sure that you know the program requirements and what they're asking for. But typically at grad school, we're really interested in those academic references, if possible. That provides us with really good insight into how you're going to be as a grad student. If you're thinking about who your letter writers can be, the key thing I would say, and this is really important, is you need to find people who know you well, who can really sit down and write a good letter for you. You might have had a very famous professor for one class, and you might want to ask them for a reference. And if they know you and they're willing to write a good reference, then that's great. But often the people who, there might be another professor who might not be as famous, but knows you better and knows you well. They might be a better person to ask for reference. So find people who know you well, and ask first, meet them if you can. An important thing to say is it's okay to remind your reference of who you are. So particularly for academic references, the professor may have taught 100 people in a class, for example. You need to remind them of who you are. It's a totally normal request to ask a professor for an academic reference. However, you might need to remind them of all of your achievements, and you might need to tell them and guide them in terms of what they can write about you in their letter of reference. Another thing I would say is, make it easy for them. So give them all of the information they need in terms of the process. How will they submit a reference and things like that. Make sure they understand what's required of them. But Danielle, before we answer some questions on this and do some top tips, you have any advice in terms of connecting or building those relationships with potential referees, and indeed how to ask for a reference?
Yeah, so if you are a current student who is taking courses, it is easier in some ways, right? You have more ability to do things like, firstly, perform as well as you can academically in the courses, as well as showing up in a professional way, being on time, being prepared, all those good things. If you can go to office hours, that is a really good and accessible way to make those connections. So if you're currently in courses, those are some strategic things to do. I know some folks attend these sessions a couple years before they tend to apply. If you can take multiple classes with the same professor, that also gives you more opportunity to build that relationship. I know there was a theme in the questions about people who may have been out of school for a number of years. That's okay. I think, to Shane's point, you may have to sort of follow up, get back in touch with someone. They may want to know more information, right? If they don't remember you very well from the time that they were teaching you, things like your CV, your statement of intent, even the conversation you have with them about your motivation for applying to grad school. Also, if you can, again, projecting a little bit ahead, hang on to assignments or papers or anything you produce in a course for a class that you think you might want to reference from. I know it won't always be possible, but if you're able to say, I took this course with you 2 years ago, here's the paper I wrote for that course, that might also, again, be something they can review, or that can help them get up to speed.
Yeah, agree with all that. Lots of really great advice there. That's excellent. And we had a good question in from Leroy, just asking, should the reference letter writers be academic professors, or could a co-op supervisor manager work as well? A co-op supervisor or a manager could work as well. That would be okay. But again, just check with the program and check the requirements. I think most programs would be fine with that. But if you're applying to, a research-based program, they may really want to get 3 academic references. But certainly, if you're applying to a course-based or professional program, I think a co-op supervisor, a work manager would be a great reference. So yeah, check with the program. And Benjamin asks, can we get references from research mentors or just professors we have a good relationship with? yeah, I think if someone's supervised your research and they are a professor or they're in academia, then that would be a good person. Professors that you have a good relationship with is important. The key thing is that whoever writes your reference, you need to be confident and you need to feel good about them sitting down and writing a good reference for you. So spending like 30 minutes writing this and doing it for you. So you'll be surprised that some of the references that we get are not good. You need to make sure that the person who you ask is going to take the time to write a good reference for you. So just bear that in mind. And I would also, as this slide says, explain the expectations to your referees. So often, when we get references from Europe, for example, they're often quite short. But the expectation in North America is that we would get a more detailed reference, giving us context, explaining the meanings of your achievements. It's not a character reference. They can talk about your character if they want, but it's not a character reference. It's much more about, how you perform, how you perform in an academic setting, what you've achieved, how you work, why you would be good in a grad school environment. So, make sure that you support your referees, make it easy for them, give them a list of things they can talk about, they can mention, like that's okay to do that, and support them through the process to make sure that you get 3 really good references as part of your application. Okay, there's lots of great questions here, so let's try and answer some of them. There was a question here from Ayinde. They've applied for the fall of 2023, and they want to know when, which month successful students are informed about admissions decisions. Well, I do actually have a slide about that. So applications are open now for September 2023, as you know, but deadlines vary by program. So you need to check the deadlines, and also when you receive the admissions decision will be slightly different by program. But typically, most offers and most decisions will go out in February or March of 2023 for a start date of September 2023. So that's when you would find out. But again, each program's different. Some programs will let you know sooner, some will be later. So don't hesitate to check in with the program if you want to know more specifically when you should hear back from them. Okay. And then the top question here from Sergio: is there a deadline to submit the English language test scores for international students? Can I apply to my graduate program if I don't have the IELTS test score at the time of submission? It's a great question. I believe you can submit your application without the IELTS test score, but I don't know if the program would be able to make a final decision without the score. So you could certainly, pay the application fee, submit the application, and then add your IELTS score later on. But the program, they can't admit you, they can't make a final decision without knowing that score and then seeing your IELTS test. So I'm pretty sure you can apply without it, but it doesn't really help you get a decision any quicker. You're going to need to provide that IELTS test score. And what I'd strongly recommend is to check in with the program that you're applying to and just let them know what you're doing and just ask them for some clarification on that. Okay, I think I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a moment, and then we'll answer some more of your questions. Okay. So I should have said this at the beginning, but we're going to stick around. We normally do 60 minutes, but we're going to do a little bit longer today. So we're going to go until 6:15 Vancouver time. So we're going to try and answer as many questions as we can in this time frame. Let's start at the top here from Claudeline. How soon could we reach out to potential supervisors? I'll start off on this, and then Danielle, if you want to jump in. What I would say is this is happening right now for program starting in September 2023. So it's really now or even earlier when you would reach out to a supervisor. But Danielle, what's your thoughts on this in terms of timing and making that connection?
Yeah, I mean, I would say as soon as you know that is your intention to apply to grad school, and as soon as you have enough of a track record that you could kind of make that case, right? If you are a first year undergraduate student, we are happy that you are thinking about these things. That might be a little bit too soon to reach out to a prospective supervisor just because you don't kind of have enough to show them. But if you're a year and a half away, by all means reach out to that supervisor. It may be the case that they say, sounds good, let's talk again in 6 months, but at least then you have that baseline to go back to. So I think sooner is better. There probably really isn't too much as too soon, as long as you're sort of in a space to actually know why you're reaching out to them and why you would want to work with them.
Yeah, good tip. Early is good. Elliot asks, do you need to have decided your specific research and supervisor before applying to research-based courses? I'm just wondering, then, if you could talk about like how specific does your research idea need to be before you apply?
Yeah, I think, it's complicated, and I will say it's also a little bit disciplinary specific. What I would suggest doing is, again, we've been talking about looking at like profiles or pages of current graduate students. They'll often list their like research area or research topic. That might give you a good guide. So I tend to think of it as having a specific idea that you are only loosely holding, because I think the reality is it might well change. And it might change because you end up working with a different supervisor. It might change because you take a course in the first semester and you realize your interests have changed. At the same time, I think being able to articulate a project that is coherent and cohesive is going to be valuable in your application. So I think you should be able to conceptualize a project that could be a feasible graduate project in your field. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to do that project. If you change your mind later, that is almost certainly going to be okay. But I think for the purpose of the application, they will find that your ability to articulate that process or that project speaks to your readiness to do the project.
Yeah, I like that. That's a really great way of putting it. That illustrating your readiness to do it, I think, is a great way of putting it. And just quickly, this first question here from Umaima, who has a degree from UCLA. So if you have a degree from UCLA, then I don't think you would need to take the English language test. Like the fact that you have that degree from an English, a school where the primary language of instruction is English, means that you wouldn't need to take the English test. But again, just make sure it's all on the website. Like, make sure that you just double check that. But as far as I know, I don't think you would need to take the English test if you'd completed your degree at UCLA. Let's see. And I know Portia's just asking us for emails. Like, we're probably not the best people. Like, we can't kind of answer application questions. It's really, those are really questions for the program. And also, like, at the graduate level, we can't, we don't have the bandwidth to be able to help individual students. Like, it's not, we can't, there isn't that sort of level of support, unfortunately, in terms of applying to grad school. But I would, if you're currently at university, there may be, for example, a writing center who you could speak to about your statement of interest, or there may be a careers counselor who give you some tips and advice. But we can't sort of help you apply, if that makes sense. But Danielle, what do you think in terms of support network and finding people who might be able to support you with a grad school application?
Yeah, I would echo that. So it's interesting. If you're a current student or a recent-ish alumni, I would go with the place where you are currently studying or have recently graduated from. Different institutions will be slightly different in terms of what they offer, but you could absolutely, writing center or career center would be kind of my first two stops. Also, professors or research mentors from your undergrad. If you are excited about applying to grad school, they probably share that enthusiasm and would would like to help you, they might be able to look at drafts, or they might at least be able to answer some of these questions. Current graduate students in your field, either within the same institution or honestly, even someone doing a master's somewhere else, could probably give you good advice. So I think, if you can find their email or if you can find them on LinkedIn or another platform, reach out, ask. They might be willing to, and they might be willing to at least look at your statement or give you some advice on their process. So you may have to ask multiple people, but I think ask whoever you can, and almost certainly a few of them will be willing to support with some aspects of the process.
Yeah, that's great. Like, and like Danielle said, people are going to be excited for you. If you're putting together a grad school application, and maybe they went to grad school themselves, they're often going to want to help you. So try and think about people who can support you. And Marina's asking, can I apply to a master's degree before I finish my undergraduate? Yes, definitely. Lots of people do that. You would just get a conditional offer, so conditional on you completing your degree and meeting the requirements of the program. But yeah, that's totally normal. You would just give us the information and the transcripts and the grades that you have so far, and we'd be able to make a decision based on that. There's a good question from Sunny here. Having been out of academia for quite some time and have lost touch with past professors, what is the recommendation for reference letters, specifically speaking to academics? Have you got any other tips on that, Danielle?
Yeah, I guess two options. The one that most people are going to go with, or that I would start with, is reach out to the professors you did study with, even if it was years ago. They are used to getting those type of requests. If they've been teaching for a while, they've probably got in the habit of keeping some sorts of notes or maybe keeping records. So you may be surprised. And again, if you can show them your current materials, they may be willing to write for you, even if it's been a number of years. The other option, which some people do pursue, would be taking a couple of additional courses in the lead up to the time that they're applying. You may have the option to do at UBC, it's called like non-degree seeking student. So you certainly don't have to do a whole other bachelor's, but maybe you take one or two courses in the field. Now, you'd want to think strategically about whether that is worth your while to do, but the advantage would be that you would be taking some courses in your discipline, and then I would be thinking from the get-go that you're taking those courses in order to build those connections.
Yeah, awesome advice. That's really great. Question here from Paula: should I request my student visa before applying to the masters? No. You should research what you need to do to get the student visa. But you would need a offer of admission letter to then apply to get a Canadian visa. So just you certainly need to research the process, but you can't apply for a visa without an offer of admission from a Canadian institution, as far as I know. Okay, so Sunny asks if programs are going to offer specific events. Many programs do, but it's really up to the program. Some programs, many programs have information sessions, but not all of them do. But I'd reach out to the program and ask them if they have any. I'm going to post the info sessions page in the chat. It has some more of our info sessions, and also if you go to the bottom, you can look at sessions that are coming up for programs. And yeah, just check the website and email the program and see if they've got anything planned. And then the next question is similar about reaching out to, if we want to learn more about the program, can we reach out to a specific program and speak to a program coordinator? You can, but some program coordinators just don't have the bandwidth to be able to deal with all of the inquiries. Like they can't sit down and have those one-on-one meetings. Like it's a little bit different compared to if you're applying to an undergraduate degree. I know if you're applying at the undergraduate level, it's easier, I think, in my experience, to get a meeting with an advisor, whereas it can be more difficult at the grad level. Danielle, what do you think on this?
Yeah, the other thing I would say, right, is if you have the desire, the ambition to go to grad school, if I'm guessing most of you have grades that are within the realistic range, and that's why you're here today, you can probably do the application process. It's possible a specific question will come up, but I think sometimes it's also, we a bit of imposter syndrome comes up, and we're like, oh, I need 7 people to look at my statement before I send it in. If you can get one or two to send it in, or to review it, great. But probably you are capable of navigating that process. And sometimes I think it comes down to having confidence in yourself, in the quality of what you're submitting. And yeah, I think if you are thinking about grad school, if you are academically getting the kind of results that make grad school feasible for you, you can probably make your way through the application process sometimes without needing a ton of support with it.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think a lot of people kind of self-select, so they may step back, But I don't know what you think, Danielle, but I think I'd always encourage people, if they are, meeting those requirements, to go ahead with the application, even though it might not be, even if they do have some reservations.
Yeah, no, and thanks, Shane. I'd like to pick that up as well. The reality is, of as grad school applications, you won't know for sure if you're going to get in, if you apply to multiple programs, which programs you will get into. So there is a little bit of an act of faith and a bit of a risk taking to it. But yeah, I think someone is going to get into these programs. All of our current UBC students, graduate students, were at one point where you are today, thinking about applying, trying to navigate that process. So I think in some ways you have as good a chance as anybody does, and it is probably worth your while to put in that application and believe that your application is a worthwhile one.
Great, great advice. I was going to answer a couple of questions really quickly. This one from Paula. I'm from a Spanish-speaking country, but some of my professors are fluent in English. Can they write my recommendation letters in English, or should I get them translated by an official translator? If they are fluent in English, go for it. Get them to write the letter and submit the letter in English. That would be preferable. Yeah, I would get them to do it in English if they're able to and they want to do it in English. Okay. See, and Path just asked, is it good to reach out to supervisor even if it's not required? Will getting them interested in your potential research help in the admissions process? What do you think of that one, Danielle?
I mean, I think it doesn't hurt. I think that in my experience, if it is the case that you don't need a supervisor when you, in order to be accepted, then most faculty members are not going to actively intervene in that application process. In fact, they may actually not be able to. It may be a conflict of interest. So it certainly doesn't hurt to, reach out, introduce yourself, tell them why you're interested in studying with them. You never know. If they do say, yes, I would love to help you get into the program, great. But I think what's more likely is they will say, I wish you the best of luck and I hope that I see you here as a master's student next fall, which is fine, right? Then it just means that you focus on your application.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But I think as well, like, it definitely doesn't hurt, and I think it shows your hard work and what you're doing. That's really great. We're just gonna wrap things up now, but I did just want to post into the chat. I just posted in the application guide, a link to our application guide. So we have a 37-page ebook, which you can download from our website. It is full of information. It covers all of the things that we talked about today. So we didn't record this session and we can't share the slides with you, but everything that you need is in the application guide, everything that we've talked about today. So make sure that you click on that link and download it. It's just the last link in the chat. And that was great. Like, thanks for all of the questions that you've posted. Like, we had over 200 people today, so we haven't obviously been able to answer everyone's questions, but we hope the information has been helpful. Danielle, have you got any final thoughts, any words of wisdom?
Yeah, just that I wish you all the best of luck if you are feeling that, as I touched on, if you feel like this is a path you want to explore, I think it is worth exploring. There is going to be some uncertainty along that path. But yeah, I do hope that all of you